The life I believed I had so carefully constructed over the past 4 years has been reduced to rubble, and the person who swung the wrecking ball was none other than my own sister. My name is Amelia, I'm 28, and the past few months have completely shattered my reality. My husband, Ethan, who is 31, and my younger sister, Chloe, who is 25, are the central figures in this nightmare. Ethan and I had been married for 4 years, a journey that began in college and which I always considered to be a strong, loving partnership. 2 years ago, we bought our first home, a cozy place in a tranquil suburban neighborhood just outside the city. My life had a comfortable rhythm. I worked as a nurse at the local hospital while Ethan was in the IT field. Chloe, however, has always occupied a different space in our family. As the youngest of 3, she was unequivocally the golden child. Our parents, Carol, 55, and David, 58, have always treated her with a leniency that bordered on worship. Growing up, Chloe could do no wrong. If a vase was broken or a mess was made, blame was always deflected from her. Our older brother, Liam, who is 32, wisely moved to another state right after his graduation, and his visits have become increasingly rare. A decision I now understand with painful clarity. The catastrophe began 3 months ago when I was rushed into emergency gallbladder surgery. The recovery was supposed to be a matter of a few weeks, but unexpected complications left me bedridden for nearly 6 weeks. I was forbidden from lifting anything heavy, unable to drive, and needed help with the most basic household tasks. Ethan initially took some time off from his job, but the pressure from his employer mounted, and after a week, he had to return to the office. This is when my parents proposed what seemed like a perfect solution. Chloe could come and stay with us to help. Having recently graduated with a marketing degree, she was currently between jobs, so the timing seemed serendipitous. I felt a flicker of apprehension, as Chloe and I have never shared a particularly close bond, but Ethan thought it was a brilliant idea. He argued it would take a significant load off his shoulders and would give me some company during the long days. Chloe arrived with 2 massive suitcases, her presence immediately filling our home. She took over the guest room and promptly began to personalize it with her own photos and plants, making it clear she was settling in for the long haul. In the beginning, I was truly grateful. She cooked meals, handled the laundry, and sat with me while Ethan was at work, entertaining me with stories about her college friends and her ambitious plans for a career in marketing. But as the second week bled into the third, a subtle but persistent unease began to creep in. Chloe started borrowing my clothes without asking. She would use my expensive shampoos and skincare products as if they were her own. When I gently brought it up, she would flash a disarming smile and say, "What's the big deal? We're sisters, after all." She also started rearranging the furniture in the living room and reorganizing the kitchen cabinets, claiming she was just trying to make things more efficient for me. Ethan seemed to be enjoying her presence more than I had anticipated. He would come home from work, and his first conversation would be with Chloe, recounting the details of his day. They would prepare dinner together while I was resting upstairs, and the sound of their shared laughter would drift up to my room. When I managed to join them for meals, the conversation often felt stilted and awkward, as if my presence had interrupted a private moment. One evening, about 3 weeks into Chloe's stay, I came downstairs for a glass of water and found them on the couch watching a movie. They were sitting far closer than necessary, with Ethan's arm draped casually along the back of the sofa, just behind Chloe's shoulders. The moment he saw me, he snatched his arm back, and Chloe instantly shifted to the far end of the couch. They both acted as if nothing was amiss, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. After that incident, I started paying closer attention. I noticed how Chloe always made it a point to bring Ethan his coffee in the morning just before he left for work. She would text him constantly throughout the day, supposedly updating him on my condition, but their digital conversations seemed to stretch on for far too long. She began doing his laundry along with mine, and I saw the unusual care she took with his clothes, folding each item with a meticulous precision. The situation reached a breaking point during my 5th week of recovery. I was starting to feel stronger and was able to move around the house more freely. One afternoon, I decided to take a nap and went upstairs around 2 p.m. Sleep wouldn't come, so an hour later, I headed back down to make some tea. As I approached the kitchen, I heard hushed voices coming from the laundry room. I froze in the hallway to listen. I could hear Chloe's soft voice, telling Ethan how difficult it must be for him to be juggling everything. Then I heard Ethan's voice, equally low, telling her how much he appreciated everything she was doing and how she made everything so much easier. A long pause followed, then a soft, rustling sound, like someone stepping closer to another. I deliberately made my presence known by walking into the kitchen and loudly asking if anyone wanted tea. They both emerged from the laundry room a moment later, their exit a little too quick. Chloe's face was flushed, and Ethan had a guilty look in his eyes. Chloe stammered that she was just helping Ethan figure out an issue with the washing machine, but when I checked it later, it was working perfectly fine. That night, Ethan was overly attentive, bringing me dinner in bed and repeatedly asking if there was anything I needed. It felt performative, as if he were trying to atone for something. Chloe stayed in her room for most of the evening, which was unusual for her, as she typically spent her evenings watching TV in the living room. I was beginning to feel like an intruder in my own home. Ethan and Chloe had developed a world of inside jokes and shared glances that I was not privy to. They would be deep in conversation and then abruptly stop the moment I entered a room. Chloe's help started to feel less like assistance and more like a takeover. She was cleaning the house relentlessly, reorganizing my things to her own liking, all under the guise of doing me a great favor. The final, undeniable confirmation came on a Thursday evening during my 6th week of recovery. I was feeling significantly better and suggested that since I was almost back on my feet, it was probably time for Chloe to head back to our parents' house. Both Ethan and Chloe immediately protested, insisting that I still needed help and that it was too soon for her to leave. Later that night, I woke up around midnight to find Ethan's side of the bed empty. I got up to look for him, assuming he was downstairs watching TV. I checked the living room and the kitchen, but he was nowhere to be found. Then I noticed the guest room door was shut tight, which was strange because Chloe always slept with it slightly ajar, citing a fear of being in unfamiliar places. I stood in the silent hallway for several minutes, just listening. I could hear faint, muffled voices from behind the door, and then I heard something that made my stomach plummet, Ethan's distinct, low laugh. I retreated to our bedroom and feigned sleep when Ethan finally crept back in about an hour later. He slid into bed with painstaking care, clearly trying not to wake me. The next morning, I told Chloe that I was feeling much better and that she should probably go home for the weekend. She looked panicked and argued that I still needed more help. Ethan sided with her, saying we shouldn't rush my recovery, but I was firm. They reluctantly agreed she would leave on Sunday. That's when I made a decision I never thought I would. On Saturday morning, while Ethan was in the shower, I picked up his phone. My hands were shaking, but a desperate need to know the truth overrode any guilt. What I found made me physically ill. There were hundreds of messages between Ethan and Chloe, starting just a few days after she arrived. They began innocently, but quickly escalated. Chloe had been sending Ethan pictures of herself throughout the day, not explicit ones, but selfies of her cooking or cleaning, always with a playful caption. Ethan had been lavishing her with compliments, telling her how beautiful she looked and how much he appreciated her. The conversations grew more intimate from there. Chloe wrote about how she'd always felt Ethan was too good for me and that she could see he was unhappy in our marriage. Ethan had responded by confessing that Chloe understood him in a way I never had. They talked about how natural their connection felt and how they wished circumstances were different. The most recent messages were from the night before. After I had gone to bed, they texted about how much they would miss each other when she left. Ethan had written that the past few weeks with her had been the happiest he'd felt in years. Chloe replied that she had been waiting for the right moment to tell him how she felt, and my surgery had provided the perfect opportunity. I took screenshots of everything, sending them to my own phone. Then I sat on the edge of our bed, the phone heavy in my hand, trying to process the sheer scale of the betrayal. My own sister had systematically seduced my husband, using my medical crisis as her cover. And Ethan, my partner, had let her, betraying me under our own roof while I was helpless in my bed. I chose not to confront them right away. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious, recovering wife for the rest of Saturday. I helped Chloe pack her things, thanking her profusely for all she had done. She hugged me goodbye on Sunday morning, promising to visit again very soon. Ethan drove her to our parents' house, and when he returned, he was quiet and distracted. It has now been a week since Chloe left, and I am paralyzed by what to do with this poisonous knowledge. Ethan has been acting guilty and distant, constantly texting someone while trying to hide his phone from my view. I know they're still in contact. I haven't told a soul what I've discovered because I don't know who I can possibly trust. My parents adore Chloe and have always taken her side in any dispute. My brother lives too far away to offer any meaningful support. I feel utterly and completely alone. I don't know if I should confront Ethan, talk to Chloe first, or expose everything to my parents. A small, cowardly part of me wants to pretend I never saw those messages and try to salvage my marriage, but I don't know if I can live with the weight of this truth. I just keep replaying how they carried on their affair while I was bedridden and completely dependent on them for care. Has anyone ever been through something this devastating? I am at a complete loss for what to do next. Update 1. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of responses to my original post. Thank you to every single person who offered advice and words of support. A great deal has happened since then, and I wanted to provide an update. In the week following my initial post, I focused on gathering more concrete evidence. I knew that screenshots of text messages, while damning to me, might not be enough, especially given Chloe's talent for twisting situations to paint herself as the innocent party. I needed irrefutable proof before I made any moves. I started by setting up a Google Voice number and a fake social media account. I used these to reach out to some of Chloe's old college friends, pretending I was organizing a surprise party for her. These conversations were incredibly revealing. It turned out this was not the first time she had pursued someone who was already in a relationship. One woman shared a detailed story of how Chloe methodically dismantled her long-term relationship during their junior year, constantly messaging her boyfriend and showing up at his apartment with food and offers of help with his studies. I also decided to take a closer look at our home security system. We have cameras covering the front and back entrances, which store footage for 30 days. I went back through the recordings from the weeks Chloe was staying with us. What I found was sickening. On multiple occasions, I saw Ethan and Chloe standing together on our back patio, their conversation intimate and their body language far too close. In one late-night video, I could clearly see them embracing for a length of time that was completely inappropriate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. All the while, Ethan's behavior was becoming more transparent. He was glued to his phone, often smiling at messages he received. He started working late more frequently, claiming his boss was piling on extra projects. He also began to criticize me in small, cutting ways he never had before, making comments about my cooking, my appearance, or my lack of energy. It felt like he was building a case against me in his own mind to justify his actions. 2 weeks after my first post, I decided to test a theory. I told Ethan I was going to a work-related dinner, but instead, I drove to my parents' neighborhood and parked down the street from my childhood home. As I suspected, Ethan's car was parked in the driveway. I waited for 2 hours. When he finally came out, Chloe walked him to his car. They stood there talking for several minutes before she wrapped her arms around his neck and hugged him goodbye. It wasn't a quick, familial hug. It was a lingering embrace that lasted at least 30 seconds. I confronted Ethan that night when he got home. I told him I knew he had been at my parents' house and asked why he lied about working late. He immediately became defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. His cover story was that Chloe had called him in a panic about car trouble, and he had gone over to help her with some technical issue. When I pointed out that our father is more than capable of handling car problems, Ethan claimed David was busy with work, and Chloe had specifically asked for his expertise. I knew he was lying, but I didn't reveal that I had seen the text messages yet. Instead, I told him that his behavior had changed drastically since Chloe's visit and that I was worried about our marriage. This sent Ethan into a rage. He claimed I was being unreasonable and that my surgery had made me suspicious of everyone. He insisted that Chloe had been nothing but a saint and that I was being ungrateful and anxious. The argument escalated, and Ethan ended up sleeping in the guest room that night. The next morning, he offered a half-hearted apology, blaming stress from work for his outburst. But his story about helping Chloe with her car still didn't add up, especially since I knew from the camera footage they had been seeing each other regularly. At that point, I decided to hire a private investigator. I know it sounds extreme, but I needed the full picture. I found a highly recommended PI who specialized in marital infidelity. I gave him all the information I had, and asked him to document Ethan and Chloe's activities for 2 weeks. The results were more devastating than I could have imagined. The Pi provided me with a folder filled with high-resolution photographs and detailed reports of their meetings all over town. They had lunch dates at secluded restaurants, met for walks in a park near my parents' house, and spent hours talking at a downtown coffee shop. The photos showed them holding hands across the table, sharing kisses, and generally behaving like a couple in the throes of a new romance. The most damning evidence came from a motel parking lot. The Pi had followed them there on a Tuesday afternoon when Ethan was supposed to be at work. He had photos of them entering a room together and emerging 3 hours later. In the pictures of them leaving, they looked relaxed and happy, walking closely with Ethan's arm wrapped around Chloe's waist. I also learned that Ethan had been lying about his work schedule. The Pi confirmed with his office that Ethan had been taking half-days and extended lunch breaks for the past month. His manager had even spoken to him about his declining performance and attendance issues. When I received the Pi's final report, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot during my lunch break and cried for an hour. My husband of 4 years and my own sister had been carrying on a full-blown affair for over a month. They had used my medical emergency as a cover and had lied to my face every single day. I decided I had to tell my parents before I confronted Ethan and Chloe. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning, knowing Chloe would be there. I had printed copies of the investigator's photos and his detailed report. When I walked into my parents' living room, the scene was painfully normal. Chloe was lounging on the couch in her pajamas, watching TV. My mother was in the kitchen making breakfast, and my father was reading the newspaper. The peaceful domesticity made what I was about to do feel even more shattering. I asked everyone to sit down, saying I had something important to tell them. I calmly laid out how I had discovered Ethan and Chloe's affair. Chloe immediately burst into tears, denying everything and accusing me of being crazy and paranoid. My parents looked confused and concerned. Then I laid the photographs on the coffee table. The evidence was undeniable. Pictures of Ethan and Chloe holding hands, kissing, entering the motel. Chloe's denials grew more frantic, but the images told the whole story. My father's face hardened with anger, but it was directed at me, not Chloe. He accused me of violating their privacy and said that hiring a private investigator was a disgusting and unacceptable way to handle marital problems. My mother just started sobbing, repeating that there must be some misunderstanding. The most shocking turn came from Chloe herself. After about 10 minutes of frantic denials, she suddenly stopped crying and looked me straight in the eye. She said that Ethan had told her our marriage was over years ago and that he was planning to divorce me anyway. She claimed Ethan had described me as cold and emotionally distant and that he had never been truly happy with me. She went on, her voice gaining strength, saying that she and Ethan shared a real connection, that they understood each other in a way Ethan and I never could. She said Ethan had confided in her about how lonely he was in our marriage, and that he had been thinking about leaving me long before my surgery. My parents sat in stunned silence as Chloe rewrote our history. She declared that she would not apologize for finding happiness with someone who truly appreciated her. She insisted that Ethan had initiated their relationship and that she had tried to resist at first, but their feelings for each other were just too strong. In that moment, the sweet, innocent younger sister I thought I knew vanished. In her place was a cold, calculating woman capable of betraying her own family without a flicker of remorse. My parents didn't know what to say. My mother just kept crying, whispering that she couldn't believe this was happening. My father seemed more concerned with the potential family scandal than the actual betrayal. Neither of them defended me or condemned Chloe's actions. I left their house and drove home to wait for Ethan. I had made my decision. I was going to confront him with everything I knew and tell him I wanted a divorce. I was done trying to save a marriage that he had already destroyed. Update 2. The confrontation with Ethan did not unfold as I had anticipated, and what happened next forced me to question everything I thought I knew about my family. When Ethan walked into the house that Saturday evening, after I had been to my parents', he acted as if it were just another day. I was sitting at our kitchen table, the pie's photos fanned out in front of me like a losing hand of cards. When he saw them, all the color drained from his face. I told him I knew everything and that he needed to leave. Ethan stood there for a long moment, just staring at the pictures. Then he sat down across from me and started to talk. And what he said changed the entire narrative. According to Ethan, the affair didn't start the way I thought. He claimed Chloe had been messaging and texting him for months before my surgery. Often at times, she knew I wouldn't be around. She would ask probing questions about our relationship, making subtle comments about how it seemed I didn't appreciate him enough. He admitted that at first, he dismissed it as a concerned sister, but her messages gradually became more flirty and then overtly sexual. Ethan confessed he should have told me about her behavior, but he didn't want to create drama between me and my family. He knew my relationship with my parents could be fraught, and he didn't want to make things worse by complaining about their perfect daughter. When my surgery was scheduled, Ethan said Chloe immediately volunteered to come and stay. She had told our parents she was worried about my recovery, but she had been privately texting Ethan about what a great opportunity it would be for them to spend more time together. Ethan claimed that he tried to maintain boundaries while Chloe was staying with us, but she was relentless, constantly engineering moments to be alone with him. She would wait until I was napping or resting to start conversations about how unhappy she thought I made him and how he deserved someone who truly valued him. According to Ethan, Chloe initiated their first kiss. He said it happened that day in the laundry room when I overheard them talking. Chloe had cornered him and told him she'd been in love with him since she first met him. Ethan admitted his weakness. He didn't push her away when she kissed him, and that's when their physical affair began. Ethan swore he never told Chloe our marriage was over or that he planned to leave me. He insisted those were lies she concocted to justify her actions to my parents. He said he had been confused and flattered by her attention, especially during a stressful time when I was recovering and our lives were in chaos. I asked Ethan why. If he wanted to save our marriage, he had continued the affair after Chloe left our house. He then revealed something even more sinister. He said Chloe had threatened to tell me that he had been the one to seduce her if he tried to end things. She had also threatened to tell our parents that Ethan had taken advantage of her while she was staying in our home to help with my recovery. Ethan then showed me his phone, pulling up text threads with Chloe that supported his story. The messages showed Chloe was clearly the pursuer, initiating contact and making plans to meet. There were texts where she wrote about how she'd always wanted Ethan for herself, and how she deserved to be happy, even if it meant hurting me. But the most chilling messages were the ones where Chloe laid out her long-term plans. She had written to Ethan about how they should wait until after the holidays to tell everyone about their relationship, to give people time to get used to the idea. She had even sent him messages discussing how they should divide our assets and asking if he thought I would agree to let them have the house. Ethan told me he had started to realize that Chloe had been orchestrating this for much longer than he'd initially thought. He said certain comments she'd made during her stay now made a horrifying kind of sense, like when she mentioned our guest room would make a great home office, or suggested new layouts for our kitchen. I didn't know whether to believe him. On one hand, the texts he showed me seemed to corroborate his version. On the other, he had still actively participated in the affair and lied to me for weeks. I told him I needed time to think and asked him to go stay somewhere else while I figured things out. Ethan went to stay with his brother, and I spent the next week replaying our entire history in my mind. I started to see signs of Chloe's inappropriate interest in Ethan that I had previously ignored or dismissed. The way she always insisted on sitting next to him at family dinners. The excuses she would make to touch his arm or shoulder while talking to him. The way she would ask about his work and hobbies with an intensity that went beyond typical sister-in-law curiosity. I also remembered the subtle digs Chloe had made about our relationship over the years, things I had interpreted as sisterly concern. She would ask if Ethan and I were really happy, or comment that Ethan seemed stressed. She had made several jokes over the years about how she thought Ethan was too good for me, which I had brushed off as compliments at the time, but now seemed deeply sinister. While Ethan was gone, I did some more digging. I tracked down Chloe's old college roommate, whose name I found in some old social media posts. What she told me was chilling. The roommate confirmed that Chloe had a pattern of becoming obsessed with other people's boyfriends. She would study their relationships, learn their interests, and then insinuate herself into their lives. The roommate told me about at least 3 separate instances where Chloe had successfully broken up a couple by convincing the boyfriend that his girlfriend didn't appreciate him. The roommate also told me that Chloe had specifically talked about me and Ethan back in college. She had shown the roommate photos of Ethan and talked about how he was her type and a much better match for her than for me. The roommate said she had always found Chloe's comments about my relationship unsettling, but didn't know what to do about it. I also learned that Chloe had been planting seeds of doubt with my parents for years, asking them if they thought Brian was happy or suggesting that I took him for granted. My parents had dismissed it as Chloe being a concerned sister, but I now saw she had been waging a long-term campaign against my marriage. Armed with this new information, I decided to confront Chloe one last time. I drove to my parents' house on a Thursday evening. I found her in her old bedroom, where she had been staying. I told her I knew about her history of targeting other people's relationships, and that I had spoken to her college roommate. Chloe tried to deny it at first, but when I showed her the screenshots of the manipulative text messages Ethan had shared with me, her entire demeanor shifted. The mask of the innocent victim dropped, and she became aggressive and defiant. She told me she never understood what Ethan saw in me and that she had always known she was a better fit for him. She insisted that Ethan had been miserable in our marriage for years, and she had simply given him the courage to admit it. Most shockingly, Chloe admitted that she had been planning to make a move on Ethan for a long time. She said my surgery had been a perfect opportunity, but that if it hadn't happened, she would have found another way. She claimed Ethan had harbored feelings for her all along, and she had just helped him realize what he truly wanted. My parents walked in during this tirade and overheard Chloe's confession. My father immediately started making excuses for her, saying she was young and had made a mistake. My mother started crying again, begging us to find a way to work this out as a family. But I was done trying to preserve toxic family dynamics. I told my parents that Chloe had intentionally destroyed my marriage, and that as a result, Ethan and I were getting a divorce. I told them I would no longer be attending any family functions or holidays where Chloe was present. My father became angry with me for issuing ultimatums, calling me dramatic. My mother accused me of trying to tear the family apart over a mistake that could be forgiven. Neither of them seemed capable of understanding that this was not a mistake. This was a calculated, malicious act designed to destroy my life. I left my parents' house that night with the cold realization that my relationship with them was irrevocably broken. Chloe hadn't just stolen my husband. She had stolen my parents and my sense of place in my own family. Update 3. I'm posting this final update, as many people have asked for closure on my divorce and family situation. The last 2 months have been a whirlwind of pain and progress, but I wanted to share how things have resolved. Ethan and I proceeded with the divorce. Despite his claims of being manipulated by Chloe, I could not forgive the fact that he had betrayed me during one of the most vulnerable times of my life. Our divorce was finalized last week. In a move that I found both cowardly and unsurprising, my father helped Ethan move his things out of our house while I was at work. We were married for under 5 years and had no children, which simplified the division of assets. I kept the house, as I could manage the mortgage on my own, and Ethan took the majority of our joint savings. He also assumed his own student loan and credit card debt. The most telling development has been the rapid implosion of Ethan and Chloe's relationship, now that they no longer have to sneak around. Since moving into my parents' home, Ethan and Chloe have apparently been fighting constantly. According to my brother Liam, who still speaks with our parents occasionally, the reality of their situation is a far cry from the fantasy they built during their affair. Chloe expected a grateful and adoring partner, but Ethan is reportedly resentful about how everything played out. He seems to blame Chloe for pushing him into a relationship he wasn't ready for, and for costing him his marriage before he knew what he wanted. Chloe, in turn, expected Ethan to be completely devoted to her, but he has been withdrawn and sullen since moving in. My parents are miserable having them both under their roof. My father has been complaining to Liam about the constant tension and drama, and my mother is exhausted from trying to play peacemaker. What they thought would be a temporary arrangement until Ethan and Chloe got their own place has dragged on for weeks with no end in sight. I have maintained zero contact with Chloe or my parents. My mother has left several voicemails on my new phone number, begging me to come over for dinner or to just call her back, but I am not ready for that conversation. My father has made no effort to reach out, which is both hurtful and expected. I have been focusing on rebuilding my life. My workplace has been incredibly supportive, and my manager even helped me adjust my shifts so I wouldn't have to risk running into Ethan or Chloe. I have also been strengthening my bond with Liam. He and his wife, Sophia, have been my staunchest allies, and they have invited me to spend the holidays with them. Liam admitted he moved across the country to escape our family's toxic dynamics and has been crucial in validating my decision to cut ties. I learned from Liam that Chloe lost the marketing job she had finally landed. Apparently, word got around through mutual acquaintances about her role in blowing up my marriage, and her new employer decided she was not a good fit for their company culture. My parents are now supporting her financially while she looks for another job. I've also learned that members of our extended family have chosen sides. Most of my aunts and uncles have been supportive of me, especially once they learned the full story. My maternal grandmother has been particularly vocal in her disappointment with Chloe's actions and my parents' handling of the situation. The house feels calmer now that Ethan is gone. I have redecorated several rooms, turning what was once Ethan's office into a reading nook for myself. I have started having friends over more often, something I rarely did when Ethan and I were together. I don't know if I will ever be ready to reconcile with my parents or Chloe. The betrayal runs too deep, and their reaction showed me how little I mattered in comparison to Chloe. My father's immediate defense of her and my mother's attempts to sweep it under the rug proved that they will always prioritize Chloe's comfort over my well-being. Some have suggested I should consider forgiveness for my own peace of mind, but I'm not there yet. For now, I'm focused on building a life that doesn't revolve around chasing approval from people who were never willing to give it freely. For the past month, I have been seeing someone new. His name is Daniel, a teacher I met through a mutual friend from work. He knows about my divorce and my family situation, and he has been incredibly patient and understanding about my trust issues. It's refreshing to be with someone who values me without games or manipulation. Looking back, I can see that my marriage to Ethan likely wouldn't have lasted, even without Chloe's interference. We had grown apart, and neither of us was putting in the work to maintain our connection. But the way it ended, and the role my own sister played in its destruction, is a wound that will take a long time to heal. I don't regret hiring the private investigator or confronting everyone with the proof I gathered. It may have been an extreme measure, but I needed the truth, and I needed evidence that couldn't be denied or twisted. Without it, Chloe would have continued to play the victim, and my parents would have enabled her. I'm sharing this final part of my story so that others in similar situations know they aren't crazy for suspecting betrayal, especially from family. Trust your gut. And don't let anyone convince you that you're paranoid when something feels deeply wrong. I also want people to know that sometimes cutting off toxic family is the healthiest choice you can make, no matter how painful it is. I would rather be on my own than spend my life begging for love from people who are incapable of giving it. That is where things stand. I am moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I am starting to feel hopeful about what the future holds.